Hello friends, so today's video is going to be a discussion about a potential adaptation of Sanderson's Cosmere. This will be more specific to the Stormlight Archive, as recently Sanderson was answering a question from a fan, and if you haven't seen the clip, I'll have it linked. It's about a 2-minute long clip. And the question was a really interesting, fascinating one. Somebody asked if you were to have a live-action adaptation for the Stormlight Archive, what would you do about the plant life that exists in our world, on our planet, that is not accurate to the books? Would you sort of at some point let certain things go? Or would the budget allow for them to go and digitally remove the plant life that doesn't fit the story? And Sanderson's answer was essentially, I'm not too worried about the budget.
I would not have to do that considering the budgets that we have been regularly offered.
Which is very promising and exciting as a fan, but that did lead me to kind of think about, if it was going to be live action, what would be the pros versus if it was going to be animated, what would be the pros? I'll admit that I am very biased. I just think fantasy works better animated, but that doesn't mean that there aren't some really awesome things to look forward to if it was live action. So I wanted to go through and talk about all the great things that would come about from a live action adaptation of Stormlight and the Cosmere in general, and then also all of the pros of animated. I'm not necessarily doing cons, because the cons of one are basically the pros of the other. Because I'm biased toward the animated ones, I'm going to start with the live action. The first point with live action is that while I think people are starting to change their mind about this, at the end of the day, I do think that some people still view animated things as for kids, and they take more seriously something that is live action. So there's the potential for Sanderson to have new viewers come in to his world, to his works, through a live action adaptation, whether it's a movie or a TV show. You have the likelihood that people who would be a little bit biased toward animated would not have that, and therefore would take a chance on something that he's done if it were live action. That is a little sad, because I'm like, oh, there's so many good things that are animated, but I also get that you want to, if you have written a story that you think would mean so much to a lot of people as his works do, you want it to reach as many people as possible. You want it to reach the people who are going to be moved by it and who are going to enjoy it. And if it turns out that he feels the best route for that is live action, then, you know, who am I kidding? I'm going to see it regardless. But if that is the best course of action, then that's the action I think that he should take. I want to be clear, too, with every single point. Sanderson knows, as does, I would say, every author, their own world better than anybody. They know what would work best for their characters. Them having as much creative control as possible is always a good thing, in my opinion. I think the most successful adaptations come from when the authors, or people who are very, very passionate about the works, in case the author has passed on, the people who are really passionate, or are the authors themselves, when they have a hand in the creation of the adaptation, I think the adaptations turn out better. They please fans, and there's continuity. There's things that flow better. So I think Sanderson knows best. These are just some discussion points for both options here. Going along with the idea of a live action potentially is more likely to bring in new viewers, I think going along with that, a very well-known actor can do a lot to pique people's interest, and they can do a lot to grant legitimacy to a live action. That frustrates me, to be honest. I wish we could not need some millionaire to be in something, some really established, really well-known person, just to take it seriously. But I also understand that there's the idea, well, that actor probably wouldn't do something if it wasn't good. They don't want to hurt their careers, so it must be pretty good if that person's in it. I understand both elements here, but realistically, when a well-known actor is participating in a project, in this case an adaptation, there are going to be people that are like, oh, well, I love that actor, so I'll go watch basically anything they do. I think a very obvious example of this would be Witcher. When Henry Cavill was announced that he was going to be in the Witcher series, a lot of people who had no idea what Witcher was. They don't care about the books. They don't care about the video game. They don't really care about fantasy. They probably weren't going to watch the show. When they saw it was Henry Cavill, they're like, ooh, I love Henry Cavill. Or, again, the idea of, well, he's a huge name. He's Superman. So he's not going to do something if it's not good. And there are people that are going to come to something just because they love those actors. And I think it's still, you can still have well-known actors be the voice actors if it's animated. But I do think there's something to be said of when you get to see the actor acting, their facial expressions, the way they use their body to bring about their art. When those people are present in a live action, I do think it brings people in. Both of those things are points that I don't really like as much because I care so much about it being the best it can be as opposed to reaching the biggest audience, but I didn't want to discount the fact that obviously you want to reach a big audience. So I wanted to point those two things out first. This next thing is exciting in my opinion because I do think that it would bring about a very amazing aspect of the Stormlight Archive, which would be there are places on our planet that I think of when I think of the Shattered Plains. So we have real places that exist that I think would be amazing if they filmed in. In that clip, Sanderson, the one I mentioned where he talks about the budget and things, he references that there are places in southern Utah that he feels like would be great. For those of you that don't live in the US, where I live, Arizona, I live somewhat northern Phoenix, Arizona. From where I live, just a little bit north of here, and then south of where Sanderson is in Utah, that entire stretch, I have driven through it, I've been to it a number of times. It is really cool, and it would be amazing to have something filmed there. It would perfectly show what the Shattered Plains, I think, are supposed to look like. Obviously, some people might imagine it differently, but Sedona, Monument Valley, Zion National Park, those places, if you've ever heard of them or seen pictures, those are the kinds of things that I could very easily see working well for a Stormlight Archive adaptation. So a great aspect of a live action would be literally seeing those things come to life from something that is real, something that exists. I think that would be pretty cool. The next one, I don't really need to go all that in depth with. In that clip, Sanderson is saying, I'm not too worried about the budget. That, if you're gonna go live action, that's the biggest thing I think for a lot of us is fantasy doesn't always look so good live action. If you're going to do it live action, you need a huge budget. And apparently, it would seem there's a pretty good likelihood that he is going to get a good budget. So the concerns about, well, maybe it won't look as good, or it's going to be weird because there's going to be some scenes that look amazing and then some scenes that are looking terrible. If you have the budget, I could see just going for it. I think Stormlight Archive, even though there's so much magic to it and there's so many fantastical elements to it, oh my gosh, would it be amazing to see great actors depicting all of the emotions and the mental health that they're experiencing, all of those things. I think it would be amazing to see some phenomenal actors that are portraying that. That would be great. And if you have the budget so that all the magic only adds to it looking amazing, I feel like I get why you might want to go that direction. The next point is that we're in the golden age of people giving fantasy adaptations a try. And in the past, I think that was rare. Even with the success of Lord of the Rings, there were still a lot of people that didn't really care about a lot of anything really to do with fantasy. And that has shifted significantly ever since, it's very obvious, but ever since Game of Thrones, there has been a willingness to try out different fantasy shows, fantasy movies, so on and so forth. So I think that if there's a time to do it where you have the chance of success, this is it. I want to add, so many people have compared Sanderson's books to Marvel. They say it's like the Marvel Cinematic Universe when they're describing it to somebody who doesn't know what the Cosmere is or isn't really that, they don't know all that much about fantasy or Sanderson's books. And I will admit, this is maybe the most shallow thing that's exciting about a potential live action, if it were a movie specifically. I think it would be awesome. How awesome would it be? Midnight showings, or waiting in line to get your ticket to go see. You know, like, I mean, maybe not waiting in line because everybody can reserve their seats in advance, but you're on the computer waiting to reserve your seat for that perfect time to go see the new Cosmere movie or something. That would be pretty exciting. That would be pretty cool. I'm pretty ready for there to be something besides the Marvel Cinematic Universe dominating the theaters constantly. It would be pretty cool if it was something else, and how awesome would it be if it was the thing that we've all loved for so long? We could all get excited to go see it. It'd be amazing. It would be amazing. But I'm not too keen on movies. I think I would rather, if we're going to get live action, have it be TV shows. At the end of the day, though, what I was just describing doesn't only need to happen for live action. You can still have that excitement building if it's animated. So that kind of segues into, I think that one is just an exciting thing in general about if we were to get an adaptation. But switching now into the pros of animated. So the most obvious one that I think we all think is fantasy looks good animated. It looks good. Magic is hard to execute. And sometimes the blending of real people and then animated things can look kind of strange. And again, if they have the budget and they can make it work and it's going to look great, awesome. But I don't want it to just look, oh, it blends well, it looks good enough. I want it to look amazing, because it's amazing up here in our heads for most of us. It's breathtaking. It's unlike anything that we probably could execute in an adaptation form. That's why I think a lot of us, as much as we want adaptations of the Cosmere, also think, but is it ever going to be really as cool, as amazing, as lush, as vivid, as vibrant? Is it ever going to be all those things in a live action, or is it just going to be serviceable? And I think with an animated show or movie or whatever it ends up being, if we did have it animated, I think it could really bring it to life. It could bring the magic to life. It could bring the spren to life. I also think anytime there's anything to do with people in the air, there's battles in the air, or any form of flying, essentially, that can be hard to pull off too. And that's the bare minimum for some of those fight scenes. You got to make that look good. It can't look cheesy. So animated, I mean, the amount of times in an anime itself, not even just animated, because there's different animation styles, but in anime, the amount of battles where people are just jumping up really high in the air and they're punching each other and they're fighting in the air, it wouldn't be a problem at all. And everything could mesh well together. There wouldn't be this strange juxtaposition of, okay, well, this is real and this is clearly not real, and so it doesn't really blend, and there's this harsh contrast that just doesn't quite fit or work. I don't think you don't have to worry about that. So the magic, the spren in Stormlight Archive specifically, and the action scenes themselves. On top of that, the Parshendi. I think that a live action could, if you get a fantastic makeup artist, the transformations that they can do are phenomenal and unbelievable. So I definitely think it's possible. However, when you have a huge group of people and you need a lot of them to look like that, what I don't want to have happen, for those of you that have seen it, is another Trollocs situation from Wheel of Time. In the Wheel of Time adaptation, you had some Trollocs that you were like, all right, that one looks pretty good. And then in other scenes, you're like, that looks really bad. And it's kind of unavoidable. You only have so much money that can only go to so many things. And when you have a scene where you have a lot of beings that are not quite human, when you have scenes like that, if you don't have the budget to make it look good when there's a lot of them, then I don't think it should be live action. I know I could forgive it. If it was really good, I mean, I can get over it. But in an animation, you don't have to worry about that. So I do think that for the Parshendi, I think that an animation would look better. Speaking of how things look, I think that if you have something animated, the characters themselves can look exactly like how Brandon Sanderson imagines his characters to look. If you don't have to worry about what the actor looks like, if they fit a certain person perfectly, you can focus on how well they can bring the character to life with their voice. And that is such a big deal to me. I think of course, it's not a surprise that I was going to bring up the show Arcane, because I love Arcane. The voice acting in that show is amazing. It is so good. And we get great voice acting in a lot of shows. Castlevania, for example, that show has some great action scenes. I enjoy that show, but the voice actors bring it to a next level. So I just think that it would be great if you could get these characters to life as accurately as possible, which matters a lot. They represent so many things we don't see all that often. The struggles with mental health. I mean, we're going to see some people shedding some tears if we get a Stormlight Archive adaptation, and I think it would be amazing if you can have actors who can bring that to life with their voices. And then on top of that, a lot of the characters in Stormlight Archive don't necessarily look like what you typically see in fantasy adaptations, and I know that having those characters be represented the way that they should be represented would be very meaningful to a lot of people. And again, I am a sucker for a great voice actor, so I'm maybe extra partial to this particular point. I mentioned Arcane, Castlevania, these sorts of animated shows a second ago. I do want to say that I think very clearly the success of those shows does demonstrate very clearly that people are willing to try more than I think ever before animated shows. Those are clearly not kids shows, especially Castlevania. And their animated shows have not been, quote, for kids for a very long time. There have been animated shows that are very clearly for adults for a while now. It's more that I would say it is in present day, you find more and more people that are realizing that or are willing to try, and they are pushing back on their own expectations. And I think what I was sort of saying about, I think that we have the golden age of fantasy adaptations right now. More people are willing to try a fantasy adaptation. I think more people are willing to try an animated adaptation as well, or just an animated fantasy show. If the budget is huge, then maybe we could get an Arcane style. Arcane also has a very distinct look. So I also would love if we could have a Stormlight Archive or Cosmere animated adaptation where it has its own signature look. When you see a commercial for it, when you see the image on the home page of whatever streaming service it is or something, you immediately know. You're like, that's Cosmere. That excites me. Another pro of a animated adaptation is that I would say currently Sanderson's fan base take animated seriously. And maybe this isn't true, maybe this is just because I am a fantasy fan, but sometimes it feels like when you reach so much for the new viewers that you kind of lose your fans a little bit, or if you're not really making the story that the fans are expecting, I don't know, I just feel like sometimes you lose what made it so special, because what made it special is appealing to this group of people. And this other group, the new viewers, the people that maybe aren't familiar with it yet, they could come to it and love it and they could join over here. But when you have the core fan base that is frustrated and they feel like kind of let down, like you're changing the story for the people over there, you lose some of them, and then the people over here, there's a chance they might not even love it. And so if that happens, it's not going to have anybody really rooting for it. So when you can please the fans, you already have an enormous group of people. Because we all saw what happened when Sanderson did his Kickstarter. We saw that he was trending. We saw the amount of money that was put toward that. We know that his fan base is huge. And a lot of us already are down to see something animated. A lot of us already are fans of anime. And we're already fans of animation. We already like all that stuff. We like video games. We already like those things. You know that we're not going to be disappointed for the most part, I would say, a lot of us. So if you have this group of people over here that are 100% on board, they love how it's coming to life because it's this story, but visual now. We can see it. If you do that for this enormous group of people, there are going to be some people over here that are like, what's this thing I keep hearing about? The thing I want to add to all of this, because this is true regardless of whether it's live action or animated, is I think one factor that has to come into play is continuity. If Sanderson is going to try and adapt the Cosmere and not just one of the stories, then you're going to probably want whatever version you do. I would think you would want to do that continuously. If you have live action for Stormlight, you probably want live action for Mistborn, which means Warbreaker and Elantris. So even though I was talking about Stormlight Archive for a lot of this, just based off of that clip I saw, I think you got to factor in what's not just going to work best for Stormlight, but for all those other ones also. Another thing I want to add that I hope we get regardless of which we someday might have, I want a fantastic soundtrack. I think that the same way that amazing voice actors can bring something to the next level, amazing music. I know all of you can hear the Game of Thrones theme. I know all of you can hear the Lord of the Rings music, if you've seen them. If you haven't seen them, but that's the thing, you might not have even seen them, and you probably know the music. So that's another thing too, is I'm like, I don't want the entire budget to go toward actors and to go toward, you know, digitally removing things. I don't want the budget to go so far for how everything looks and getting the actors that maybe you don't have it for the music. I really want a good soundtrack. I am making so many demands. I will watch or play, if it was a video game, I will take in whatever we are given. I'm excited no matter what. And like I said, and even though there were times I got really passionate about how I would love an animated version, Sanderson knows his own world, and I am excited for whatever comes about. We are lucky that we will potentially get an adaptation later on down the road. I'm just excited about that. I just thought it'd be fun to go through the pros of the different possibilities. So, on that note, what are the pros in your opinion? Were there any details I didn't mention that you think are vital? Is there one that you prefer over the other? And then while there are certain things that are more important to me than other aspects, what details are the most important to you? What's the thing that stands out to you the most? Like, I need this if we're going to get an adaptation. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day. If you are interested in seeing more Sanderson or Cosmere content, I'll have my playlist linked. If you're interested in seeing an interview with Brandon Sanderson, I'll have my interview with him linked as well. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you all later. Bye.